Stand outside, you're useless.
A business deal expected to yield $50 million in profits. As we arrived at the client's office and were about to enter the meeting room, my boss said this. "What?" Leaving me bewildered in the hallway, my boss entered the meeting room alone and shut the door firmly behind him. Just as I was about to grab the doorknob, still frozen in place, the CEO of the client's overseas headquarters appeared before me. He burst into the meeting room, grabbed my arm, and pulled me inside. Both my boss and the client's representative were taken aback, their eyes wide with surprise. They both opened their mouths as if to say something, but no words came out.
Why are you?
My boss finally managed to speak, his voice raspy. The room was so tense it felt like sparks could fly at any moment. The atmosphere was so charged that even speaking carelessly seemed forbidden. I stayed silent, waiting for the CEO to make his move. He opened his mouth and solemnly declared,
"The $50 million contract is off the table."
My name is Tyler Johnson, currently 41 years old. I'm a regular employee at a certain trading company. This is a fairly well-known company with branches in various locations. When I first joined, I worked at the headquarters, but in my late 20s, I was constantly transferred, and now it's been about 10 years since I returned to the headquarters. There must be many new employees, and it feels like there are more unfamiliar faces than those I know. I entered the building from the entrance and headed towards the sales department floor. Along the way, I passed by some young employees who gave me curious looks, probably because they didn't recognize me. I realized how long I'd been away. Upon reaching my destination, I took a deep breath and greeted the employees who were already at their desks, staring at their computer screens. "Good morning." Everyone turned to look at me at once. I didn't recognize any familiar faces, and the puzzled looks spread a sense of loneliness within me. "No," I shook my head slightly. I did it discreetly enough so the other employees wouldn't think I was strange. I mustn't be timid from the start. I didn't do anything wrong. I just greeted them as a new member of the same department. Besides, they're staring at me now because I'm a new face. As time goes by, I'll surely get used to it. With that thought, I lifted my head, which had been slightly lowered.
Are you Tyler, the one returning to the headquarters today?
A clear voice rang out. I saw an employee walking towards me from the back of the floor, her heels clicking on the floor. She was a young woman with long blonde hair tied up, sharp eyebrows, and a confident expression.
I'm Kathy Brown, the department manager. Nice to meet you.
I greeted back. "Nice to meet you too." I heard a snicker and nervously looked up. Kathy was covering her mouth with her hand, her cold eyes fixed on me. There was a clear sense of disdain in her eyes. What was going on? Is something wrong?" I asked, tilting my head. She smirked and spoke.
No, I just thought it was funny to see such a dull old guy here. You seem a bit dazed. I was just worried if you'd be okay.
I never expected to be spoken to like that, and I could only stand there with my mouth agape. I don't know Kathy's exact age, but she seemed younger than me. I don't believe that older people are superior just because of their age, but her way of speaking felt odd. Even though she is my boss, why does she have to be so rude to someone she's meeting for the first time? Why do you think that? Snapping back to reality, I looked directly into Kathy's eyes and asked. She snorted again. We had only been face to face for a few minutes, but I felt like I understood a bit about her. She has a habit of looking down on people and often snorts at those she mocks. As I was thinking this, I heard a loud laugh. Then, in a voice dripping with sarcasm, she continued to mock me as if asking, "What kind of question is that?"
Well, you've been demoted continuously until you came back to the headquarters, right? I heard you've been transferred to remote branches. There's no way someone like that is competent. You're definitely useless.
Hearing this, I was once again dumbfounded. Kathy seemed to have misunderstood something. What she said was quite far from the truth. To clear up the misunderstanding, I opened my mouth to speak. Kathy, But my words were drowned out by her laughter.
And you ask, why do you think that? It's ridiculous that you don't realize your own uselessness. Oh, that's so funny.
Her voice echoed down the hallway, and employees from other departments peeked out to see what was happening. Before I knew it, I had attracted even more attention than when I had greeted everyone earlier.
And aren't you in your 40s? Being useless at that age is hopeless. If you were younger, maybe, but there's no potential for someone your age.
Please, just stop talking. Maybe my silent plea was answered. Right then, it was time for the morning meeting, and other employees, including the manager, started filing in. Kathy, still looking dissatisfied, pursed her lips and returned to her desk. I breathed a sigh of relief. I never expected to have such an experience on my first day back at the headquarters. I almost let out a sigh but held it in, remembering the morning meeting was about to start. But why did Kathy think I had been demoted to remote branches? Her words replayed in my mind, and I tilted my head in confusion. It's hard to believe that people in higher positions would have communicated in a way that caused such a misunderstanding. Nobody wants to work with someone who calls them useless. How can I correct Kathy's perception and avoid hearing such things again? As I thought about this, I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. She was seriously reading some documents. Well, it should be okay. If she became a manager at such a young age, she must be passionate about her work. In other words, I believe she was a serious person at heart. If I can produce results at work, she'll naturally clear up the misunderstanding. My assigned desk is far from hers, and unless something significant happens, she probably won't talk to me during work. But I was naive to think that way. A few days after returning to the headquarters, my distrust of Kathy only deepened.
Oh man, just looking at your clueless face kills my motivation.
Her stream of insults showed no sign of stopping. She would even make a point of stopping by my desk on her way to the restroom or break room just to hurl these words at me. And she did it when the manager or other higher-ups were not around, which made it even worse.
What if everyone's sales performance drops because of useless you? Make sure not to drag us down, okay?
I tried not to let it get to me, but hearing it repeatedly was wearing me down. I nearly lost my temper more than once, forgetting that she was my boss. Kathy, haven't you heard anything about me from the other employees? I asked.
What would I need to hear? Do I need to be told again that you're a useless old man? It's obvious just by looking at you.
She wouldn't take me seriously. Is it really okay for someone in a managerial position to constantly look down on others like this? I wondered what the other employees thought. Glancing around, I saw them giving me looks of sympathy. That alone made it clear that Kathy had been treating others like this for a long time. One day, I decided to ask the employee sitting next to me about it. Of course, I did it when she wasn't around. Has Kathy always been like that? The employee nodded immediately. He told me about all the things she had done. Apparently, she often dumped her paperwork on others and then took credit for their work. Some employees had tried to band together to report her to the higher-ups.
Who do you think they'll believe? You guys with no titles or me, the manager? If you try to report me, I'll just say you conspired to frame me.
She threatened them. I was stunned to hear this. I couldn't believe she had gone that far. The employee next to me sighed quietly. Talking about Kathy seemed to bring back unpleasant memories for him, filling him with bitterness.
I've had work dumped on me by her too. She makes her subordinates do her work, then looks at the results and laughs. This is such low quality. If it's so bad, why doesn't she just do it herself?
Hearing this, I frowned deeply. I knew it was only a matter of time before she said the same to me. As I spent more time in the sales department, I noticed that there were several veteran employees with more experience and better sales records than Kathy. It baffled me how she had a higher position than them. But after hearing the stories from the employee next to me, I began to understand. She must have risen to her position by taking credit for others' work. One day, while I was still grappling with these suspicions, I was assigned to go on a business trip with Kathy. We were scheduled to visit a branch of a large corporation with its headquarters overseas. This company was so renowned globally that the deal was expected to bring in $50 million in profits. Because of the scale of the deal, Kathy, as the manager, was coming along. However, the main person in charge this time is not her but me. The manager also told me to lead the presentation.
Make sure you don't say anything unnecessary during the meeting, okay? You probably can't do a decent presentation anyway.
She said this on our way to the client's office. I had spent a lot of time preparing materials and practicing for this presentation. Her words felt like a mockery of all my efforts, and I bit my lower lip in frustration. This time, I couldn't just listen quietly. I decided to speak up. I can't do that. The director told me to lead this meeting. Before I could finish, Kathy's face twisted in rage and she screeched at me.
What? How dare a useless person like you defy me? Do you think that's acceptable?
I had never seen her look like this before. I had seen her sneer many times, but this was the first time I saw such anger and hatred. I was taken aback by her transformation. She seemed to think I was about to comply with her demands since I wasn't saying anything. Gradually, her expression returned to normal. Well, it wasn't that I didn't want to say anything, I just couldn't.
Anyway, don't do anything. Frankly, I could have handled this business deal alone.
No, Kathy. When I tried to interject, she glared at me sharply. It was clear she wasn't going to give me a chance to respond. Soon, we arrived at the client's office. After checking in, we were shown to the meeting room, but just as I was about to grab the door handle, Kathy made a gesture to stop and roughly shoved my shoulder. "What are you doing?" I asked in a panic. Her lips curled into a sneer.
As I thought, someone as useless as you shouldn't even be allowed to attend the meeting. Stand outside, you're useless.
What? Leaving me dumbfounded in the hallway, Kathy went into the meeting room alone and shut the door firmly behind her. I stood there with my arm half raised, my eyes and mouth wide open, frozen in place. Anyone watching must have found the sight quite ridiculous. How did it come to this? Why am I being treated this way? Questions swirled in my mind, but I couldn't move. It felt like I was bound by invisible chains. Then I heard a familiar voice.
Tyler, what are you doing here?
I turned quickly towards the voice. There stood my acquaintance, a German man named Lucas. He looked at me quizzically, tilting his head. When he appeared, I felt the tension drain from me, and my tightly pressed lips relaxed. Even my posture, which I kept straight during work, slumped. Actually, my boss, who came with me for the business meeting, told me to wait outside. I briefly explained the situation to Lucas. Of course, I skipped the part about being called useless. As I continued, Lucas' eyebrows knitted together, and I could see his anger building. So that's what happened. When I finished, Lucas nodded slowly, crossing his arms and muttering in a low voice.
Got it.
Then he flashed me a grin.
Let's just go inside together.
Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm and marched towards the meeting room, throwing the door open forcefully. Both Kathy and the client's representative looked at us in shock. They opened their mouths as if to say something, but couldn't get any words out.
Why are you here?
Kathy finally managed to speak, her voice raspy. For clarification, she wasn't talking about me but Lucas. She didn't seem to care that I had entered the room. Her eyes were fixed on Lucas. He stared back at her with a sharp gaze. The room was so tense it felt like sparks might fly. It was clear that speaking carelessly was not an option. I stayed silent, waiting for Lucas to act. His face was unreadable, devoid of the playful smile he had shown me earlier. How much time had passed? Probably only about 3 minutes, but it felt like 2 hours. Lucas moved first. He opened his mouth and solemnly declared,
The $50 million contract is off.
Lucas actually works for the overseas headquarters of the company we were negotiating with. Or rather, it would be more accurate to say he runs it. He's the CEO. Kathy was shocked to see him because she never expected the CEO to show up for the meeting. When he announced the cancellation, she froze, her eyes wide. She looked like a computer stuck in a loading screen. As I drifted into my own thoughts, I idly imagined that if a computer processing information were personified, it would probably look something like this. I bet I looked just as stiff earlier when I was standing in front of the reception room. Kathy seemed to forget to breathe and finally took a deep, shaky breath and clung to Lucas with her breath catching between words. Her face turned red, either from lack of oxygen or the panic of having the deal canceled.
Wait, please, why? Why cancel all of a sudden?
Lucas raised an eyebrow at her words.
Why, you ask? Do you not realize what you've done?
Kathy tilted her head in confusion. Her eyes darted around as she tried to think, but she couldn't come up with an answer and fell silent. Lucas sighed deeply before speaking again.
It's because you left Tyler standing outside and didn't let him participate in the business meeting. Weren't you told that he was supposed to lead this discussion?
How do you know that? Wait, Tyler?
Kathy looked utterly baffled, holding her head in her hands. She seemed overwhelmed by too many questions. Why the contract was being canceled, why Lucas was close to me, and more. As she looked to me for answers, I started to explain the situation step by step. Actually, I have been working at an overseas branch for over 10 years. During that time, I worked with Lucas, and we built a strong professional relationship. When I told Lucas that I was returning to the headquarters and coming back to the US, he mentioned he would also be in the US around the same time. We agreed to work together again here. The reason I was told to lead this deal is because the higher-ups knew about my connection with Lucas.
No way. You worked overseas? I thought you were just a useless old man.
Forgetting we were in a professional setting, Kathy mumbled in disbelief. Lucas' eyebrows knitted together upon hearing her. I don't know why you thought I was a useless person constantly being demoted, but I suspect you heard something from the manager about someone returning after multiple transfers and jumped to conclusions. Kathy gasped as if hit by a revelation. Lucas, clearly annoyed, continued in a sharp tone.
So you misunderstood a lot of things and ended up treating Tyler as useless? Unbelievable. He's very competent and was highly successful overseas.
Even in this situation, I felt embarrassed to be praised. I tried to keep a straight face.
I was really looking forward to working with Tyler, and you told him to wait outside. You didn't listen, made wrong assumptions, and casually insulted him. I can't do business with a company that has people like that.
Kathy had no words to respond and slumped her shoulders. I glanced from her to Lucas, who gave me a playful wink.
If you reassign Tyler as the lead on this deal, I'll reconsider canceling the contract.
Lucas shrugged theatrically and looked between me and Kathy. I was ready to give the presentation at any moment. It was up to Kathy to decide. Even someone as self-centered as her could understand which would be more damaging to the company, losing $50 million in profit, or taking the lead away from me. She strained her voice, her face filled with anguish.
Understood. I'll let Tyler take charge.
Lucas, satisfied, waved her off with a flourish.
Great. Now that we're about to start an important business meeting, could you wait outside?
The phrasing was different, but it was essentially the same thing Kathy had told me not long ago. She clearly didn't expect to hear it directed at herself and looked visibly shaken. Shocked, she clutched her chest and shuffled out.
All right, let's get started, Tyler.
Lucas' cheerful voice made me smile, and I began the presentation with the materials I had painstakingly prepared. What happened during this business meeting quickly spread throughout our company after Lucas reported Kathy's behavior to our CEO, demanding appropriate action. Apparently, Lucas hadn't intended to make it such a big deal out of it.
Kathy was incredibly rude to Tyler. What was she thinking?
That was how he told, but as a result, Kathy's past misdeeds, such as shifting work onto others, taking credit for their achievements, and verbally abusing subordinates, came to light. Why had Kathy behaved this way in the first place? It turned out she had a habit of spending extravagantly on branded bags and accessories, even cutting into her living expenses. Her desires knew no bounds, and she wanted more and more. She thought that by getting promoted, her salary would increase. However, as I had suspected, her abilities were not that high. So, she resorted to taking credit for others' work. Kathy was stripped of her managerial position and transferred to a remote branch. 6 months have passed since then. There's no sign of Kathy returning to the headquarters. She will probably remain in her current situation until she genuinely reflects on her actions and changes her behavior. Since she left the sales department, the atmosphere has improved dramatically, with no more insults or forced work. Of course, I'm one of them too. The stress of being called useless every day was immense. With no one stealing credit anymore, those with good sales records are rightfully recognized. The vacant managerial position was filled by a skilled employee with excellent sales performance. Regarding myself, I was promoted to director. My success in securing the deal with Lucas's company was recognized. However, despite my new role, I remain humble and continue working on the front lines. I still keep in touch with Lucas, and we're planning to take on another big project together. I am determined to keep pushing forward. With that in mind, I clenched my fist with